Hi there! Welcome to another lecture in Bio 24. This one I've been told by a number of students is one of their favorite lectures. So while it's a little long, I hope you appreciate it. In this lecture, we're going to be learning about what happens in your brain when you fall in love. When you fall in love with a romantic partner, but also when you're in love with family members and friends. So in this case, we're going to be discussing major changes that happen in your body in response to love and what chemicals in the brain are involved. Some of these studies are done using the scientific method, and that is observation, question, hypothesis, and importantly, experimenting with a control group, coming up with results and conclusions. Other information is derived from a newer field of study referred to as evolutionary psychology. We didn't get to discuss this semester, but in evolutionary psychology, what scientists try to do is to understand why we think the way we do using evolution as a guide. It is not done using the scientific method or experiments with control groups, but instead is using logic based on our understanding of evolution and human behavior. The reason for this is because it's very challenging to run a controlled scientific experiment on people. You would need to trace evolution in a different population of people, which would be, in many cases, very difficult. As we go through this, it might be a nice challenge for you to try to determine which of the following is real science and which is evolutionary psychology. The easiest way is to try to figure out whether or not the studies that you're learning about in this lecture involved controlled scientific experiments or observation of human behavior. Before we get into the biology of love, I want to review a little bit about different parts of the brain. First, we've talked about the pituitary gland before. This is the region of the brain that produces hormones for the body. Then there's the frontal lobe, which is the whole front part of the brain, and this controls personality, thought, memory, and behavior. The cerebellum, back here, controls balance and coordination. The hypothalamus, located here, controls emotions. And then there's the brainstem, which consists of all the fibers leaving the brain in order to pass through and meet up with your limbs, glands, and other regions of the body. Remember that the brain is made of neural cells or neurons, which communicate to each other using chemicals or electrical signals. In this lecture, we're going to be talking mostly about the chemicals, because remember that chemicals can provide specific information, whereas an electrical impulse is just a simple on-off switch. In the brain, the chemicals that are involved are referred to as neurotransmitters. And these are specific molecules that can be transmitted from one cell to another and send a specific signal, such as to increase signal intensity or decrease signal intensity. Hormones are also used by the body to signal information. Hormones are different than neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are sent from one neuron to another cell, whereas hormones are a general name for a type of chemical produced in one area of your body, sent to a different area of your body and acting there. Neurotransmitters travel a very short distance. They literally go just across the synapse from one cell to a next neighboring cell, whereas hormones are transmitted in the bloodstream or lymphatic system and move throughout the body to go very far distances to where they are received by their target cells. Hormones can be fats, like steroids. We talked about this in our first lecture. So estrogen and testosterone are a type of fat, and they are also a hormone. Proteins, like human growth hormone, and small molecules, like nicotine, that we'll talk about in a subsequent lecture. Hormones can move from organism to another organism, and in that case, we refer to these as pheromones. Pheromones are often used to attract a mating partner, but not always. The response to a hormone varies depending on what tissue receives it. Mostly, we're going to talk about what the hormones do in the brain, but keep in mind that hormones like testosterone and estrogen can play a role on many different organs of the body. Now, when we talk about love, there are lots of different types of love. Biologically speaking, the way we can measure love in the body and the brain, there are 4 different types of love that we're going to be talking about today. There's the love between a mother and the child, which is familial love or love within a family. Then there's the love that leads to procreation, which is essentially romantic love. There's lust, which is when you first meet a potential romantic partner. After that, there might be 6 months of short-term romantic love that we're going to be talking about. And that would be within the first 6 months of spending time with a potential romantic partner. And then finally, there's long-term romantic love, which biologically speaking is anything after 6 months of being with a romantic partner. So if you've been with a romantic partner for 1 year or 30 years or more, biologically speaking, there's no difference between those individuals. We're going to talk about these different types of love separately. First, discussing familial love. Familial love is the love between a mother and a child. This has been most widely studied. Of course, there's love between siblings, love between a father and children, grandparent love, and so forth. But the one that's most reliably studied is the bond between a mother and child. This is because it's one of the easiest types of bonding within families to study. So let's begin by talking about this type of familial love, that between a mother and child. During birth, mothers produce endorphins in their brains. This helps reduce the pain of childbirth, providing a feeling of joy with the birth as well, and increases every time the mother touches her young infant. This helps promote the birthing process to allow the mother to consider giving birth again despite the pain and difficulty of the process. It's not just endorphins that are produced in a mother during childbirth. Mothers also feel a rush of oxytocin every time she holds her newborn baby. Oxytocin, remember, is a neurotransmitter. This is a small protein that sends signals around the brain every time contact, touch, or cuddling is done. Oxytocin stimulates nurturing feelings between the mother and the child, pair bonding between the two, and a sense of trust in their relationship. We're going to see oxytocin playing a pivotal role in many areas of the feeling of love. Oxytocin allows people to trust one another and/or fall in love with each other. Oxytocin, being such an important hormone and neurotransmitter for love, has been experimented with scientists. There are perfumes on the market that contain oxytocin. And there is some evidence that it might be good in forming trust in business meetings as well, allowing a client to trust a business manager more than he or she normally would. Whether or not oxytocin could act as a pheromone promoting romantic relationships is yet to be seen. Here's that oxytocin molecule. You don't need to know this, but it's just nice to see. It's not too large, but it is a small protein. Prolactin is another hormone that's produced in the mother's body after birth. Prolactin is involved in stimulating lactation in order to promote breast milk formation for her young infant. Interestingly, prolactin is involved in not only the female after childbirth, but is also seen to spike a little bit in males. Males, of course, generally cannot breastfeed. However, the alternative function of prolactin is not just for breast milk formation, as the name might indicate, but it also reduces sex drive in men and women. This would make sense that after a woman has a child and the child is able to breastfeed, that she should spend more of her time focusing on the needs of the infant than in trying to get pregnant again. As babies grow, they change with their environment. And just like nutrients help an individual grow, receiving love from a parent and relatives also helps in the development process. It is in fact important to receive love from parents and relatives in order to help proper brain development. There are some studies that have shown in both laboratory animals and in humans that without love, such as in cases of neglect, stress hormone receptors end up being overstimulated in a child's brain. These stress hormone receptors, being overstimulated, try to compensate by becoming reduced in quantity in the brain. So individuals that were neglected as children end up having fewer stress hormone receptors in their brains as adults. This is their body's way of trying to compensate with being stressed out all the time. Because they have fewer stress hormone receptors in their brains as adults, this ends up leading to a generally unhappier life because they're not able to respond to stressor situations as a typical individual would. Like for instance, if they have an exam coming up, they'd be less likely to study because they wouldn't be as stressed out as they should be. If a partner or romantic partner is really upset with them, maybe they would be a little bit more indifferent because again, they're not as stressed out as a normal individual would be. Babies also receive a feeling of comfort from their surroundings, which is why some people think that individuals tend to choose mating partners much like their parents. If you've ever heard of the phrase, "Oh, I married my father," or "Oh, I married my mother," that reflects upon this concept, that an infant and a child looks around their surroundings and finds comfort from that feeling and ends up marrying an individual that mimics that comfortable environment from their childhood. So that's what we have for familial love. We're going to spend the rest of the lecture talking about romantic love. First beginning with initial contact, which I'm just going to simplify and refer to as lust.